Now, protesters from France's Yellow Vest campaign have vowed to continue demonstrating, despite a decision by the French government to put a freeze on controversial tax reforms. The suspension of the planned fuel tax increase is seen as a major climb down for President Emmanuel Macron, who had previously vowed not to give in to the unrest. Richard Good has the story.
The violence that swept through France has shocked President Macron's government into action. Announcing what appears to be a major U-turn, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said controversial tax hikes on fuel would be suspended.
If the majority have struggled to convince the French people, then we must change something. Anyone would have to be deaf or blind not to hear or see the anger on the streets. But no tax should endanger the unity of the nation.
Within hours, Philippe spoke to France's National Assembly, explaining that the taxes would indeed be halted, but only for 6 months to allow time for dialogue. The reaction was damning.
Monsieur le Premier Ministre,
if your only response, Mr. Prime Minister, is the suspension of the Macron fuel taxes, then you still haven't realized the gravity of the situation. Your announcement today condemned the French people to a few months' deferment. But what they're asking you, it's not the suspension, but the cancellation of the fuel taxes. Mr. Prime Minister, too little, too late.
Many protesters say they'll continue with their demonstrations. The movement has gone beyond the issue of fuel tax, with some accusing President Macron of favouring the rich.
My father was a miner. He worked hard all his life. He participated in the May 1968 protests, and I'm not ashamed. Thanks to this, we got 30% improved spending power. Now, Mr. Macron, you need to listen to the people, because you're not listening, because there is misery in France.
The question now is how far it might spread. Student protesters across France who've been complaining for weeks over education reforms have declared support for the Yellow Vests. And 2 transport unions are to hold a strike at the weekend. Richard Good, Euronews.
Well, as the government deals with that crisis within the Gilets, frustration is continuing to rage across France as protesters are told that further violence will not be tolerated. Our reporter, Annalise Borges, has spent the night with a group in Lille in the north of France, and she joins us from there this morning. Good morning to you, Annalise. Look, on the face of it, it seems as though the protesters have got what they wanted in the form of this concession. So what are they calling for now? Why are they still out?
Well, good morning, Belle. It really depends who you speak to. These gathering here in the northern city of Lille have been telling us that they don't even want to hear from Emmanuel Macron anymore. They don't believe in the French president. They don't believe in his intentions to do anything to improve their living conditions. While others here say that they actually are ready to give Emmanuel Macron a second chance, perhaps, but only if the president doesn't simply postpone this increase in taxes, but rather drops the plan altogether and offers them a significant increase in the minimum wage. These people have been gathering here for the past 2 weeks. They are, of course, gathering in very basic conditions. There is one tent here where some of them sleep, some of them spend the night. As you can see, they're burning wood for heat, and they've been eating what people that pass by here give them. They have been experiencing, and we have seen this last night, several drivers dropped by and came to donate some wood for the fire, some pain au chocolat, some pastries, some soup. And these people say that that is precisely why this movement is so strong, because it has the support, the popular support of the majority of people in France who also feel left out from the priorities of the government of Emmanuel Macron.
Well, the picture we've seen of France over the last week or two is of a deeply divided country. How deep are those fractures, Annalise?
Well, if the Yellow Vests movement has shown us anything, is that France has not been spared by the kinds of divisions and fractures that we've seen happen in other parts of the world. We've seen it happen in Italy, we've seen it happen in the US, where large parts of the population say that they feel left out from progress, left out from the effects, the impact, the social and economic impact that globalization has in societies. These are the people, they say, from the peripheral areas, from outside of the urban centers, and they say they don't feel like they have a space in France anymore. I've been asking them about that and about what is next for the so-called Yellow Vests movement. Take a listen to what one of the protesters here had to say.
Il représente le peuple et il y aura un parti, j'en suis persuadé. On est obligé d'écouter le peuple. Maintenant, il y en a marre que ce soit des énarques, des technocrates qui ne peuvent pas savoir en fait ce qu'on ressent, le peuple, qui se lève justement tôt, qui travaille difficilement, ou bien qui sont en situation de handicap et qu'on les aide pas, qu'on les laisse pour compte, il y en a assez. Maintenant, ce qu'il nous faut, c'est des représentants qui sont partis de notre parti, de notre en fait voilà situation.
So there is an irony there, of course, the fact that these people who have been, at least so far, apolitical are now considering perhaps entering politics and representing the people in the same kind of arena that they have been fighting against. And the irony lies also in the fact that Emmanuel Macron was the one that offered, at least during the presidential campaign, the alternative, the break away from traditional politics. And now it seems he is no longer their president. They say they don't recognize him anymore. They want him out of power, and they want power to be given to the people.
Thank you, Annelise Borges there in Lille. And as she was talking about President Macron reacting to that, well, let's go over to Paris to find out what the government says in return. Stéphane de Vries joins us now live from the French capital. Good morning to you, Stéphane. We've seen a massive climb down from the president, who said that he would not be ruled by protests when he stood for election. So is he losing control? Is this a huge defeat for him?
Well, he reached out to the Yellow Vest, but basically what he did yesterday was quite smart. It was more technical adaptation of the tax increase, because it's just a suspension, and I think in 6 months from now the government will just continue with this tax on fuel prices, hoping that the Yellow Vests movement will have stopped their protest. But it seems at the same time that the government is losing, well, I wouldn't say control, but at least grip on its reform program. This morning, the government spokesman Benjamin Griveaux said that the government was thinking of maybe reintroducing the wealth tax. That's one of the main critics of the lower incomes, that Macron is the president of the rich. So the government seems to be changing its mind according to what's happening in the streets. And that's exactly what Emmanuel Macron said that he wouldn't do. Now, of course, there is also the point that Macron has to adapt his policy. He's seen as very arrogant, not in touch with the people, and that's a paradox. Annelise was talking about the irony that he's now being cornered by a movement coming from the streets with no ties, and that is exactly how he was elected, or at least how he campaigned. He also said during his campaign that he wanted to look more like Germany or Scandinavia with a more consensus model. And as soon as he became a president, he became the same kind of president as this country has seen over the last 50 years, with the same problems, not being capable to reform this country. And Emmanuel Macron seems to have lost, well, I wouldn't say power, but at least the control over what is going to happen in this country. And he will be facing a very, very difficult other 3 years of his mandate.